Most people remember Cinderella as a gentle fairy tale, but its original stories were far from innocent. The earliest versions involved stolen sandals, golden shoes, and acts of ruthless ambition dating back to ancient Egypt and Tang-era China. Later, in Europe, the tale twisted into punishments so severe they rarely appear in modern retellings. How did a brutal warning meant for adults become a bedtime fable? To understand, we need to return to where the lost shoe first changed a life. In the 1st century of the Common Era, a Greek geographer named Strabo recorded a story set along the banks of the Nile. A young woman named Rhodopis, born in Thrace and sold into slavery, found herself in Egypt, living far from her homeland. Rhodopis was a hetera, a courtesan whose beauty and wit caught the attention of poets and travelers. But her life changed not through charm or cleverness, but by an act of fate. Strabo describes how, as Rhodopis was bathing, an eagle swooped down and snatched one of her sandals. The bird carried the shoe high above the city of Memphis, then dropped it into the lap of the Egyptian king as he sat in judgment. Struck by the strange event and the delicate shape of the sandal, the king ordered his men to search across Egypt for the owner. When Rhodopis was found and brought before him, he made her his queen. This account, brief and almost matter-of-fact, is the oldest surviving version of the lost shoe motif. There is no mention of a wicked stepmother, jealous sisters, or magical intervention. The story offers only a sudden change in fortune, a slave girl recognized and elevated by a king, her status transformed by a single lost sandal. Strabo's tale stands apart from later retellings, focused not on family cruelty or supernatural help, but on luck, beauty, and the unpredictable hand of destiny. In the world of ancient Egypt, where social mobility was rare and slavery a fact of daily life, Rhodopis's story would have sounded both marvelous and unsettling. Her rise from servant to queen, triggered by a chance event and a royal command, was less a lesson in virtue than a reflection of how power and desire could overturn the established order. Later versions of the Cinderella story would add layers of morality and magic, but in Strabo's account, it all began with a sandal, an eagle, and a king's search for something extraordinary. In the 9th century, a new version of the lost shoe story appeared far from the Mediterranean. In the Chinese collection Yuyang Zazu, compiled by Duan Chengxi around 860 CE, a tale unfolds that feels much closer to Cinderella as most people recognize it, yet it remains rooted in a very different world. The story centers on Yexian, a gentle orphan living under the harsh rule of her stepmother in a remote southern village. Forced into endless labor and denied even the simplest kindness, Yexian finds her only comfort in a small golden carp she secretly befriends. The fish is more than a pet. In the beliefs of Tang-era China, animals could act as vessels for ancestral spirits, and the fish comes to represent the memory of Yexian's lost mother. This is a story about family ties and about how the past can return through unexpected forms. The idea of the ancestor as a living presence shapes everything that follows. When her stepmother discovers the secret, she kills the fish and serves it for dinner, leaving only its bones. Grieving, Yexian gathers the bones and hides them, guided by dreams and whispers that promise help in times of need. The hidden bones become the hinge between sorrow and salvation. As the spring festival approaches, a time when villagers dress in their finest and seek out new fortunes, Yexian longs to attend but has nothing to wear. Alone with the hidden bones, she prays for aid. The bones respond, granting her a gown of shimmering silk and a pair of golden slippers, each delicate and impossibly small. Disguised by magic, she slips into the festival, dazzling everyone with her beauty. Fearing her stepfamily's recognition, she flees into the night, losing one slipper as she escapes. The single slipper becomes the proof she cannot carry alone. The golden shoe is discovered by a king from across the sea, who becomes determined to find the woman whose foot fits this rare treasure. After a search spanning many villages, Yexian is finally found. The shoe fits only her. She is brought before the king and, in a moment that echoes across centuries, her suffering ends in marriage and elevation to royalty. The presence of the king closes the tale, but it is the journey to that moment that matters. The story of Yexian preserves elements now familiar: the cruel stepfamily, the magical helper, the lost shoe as proof of identity, and the public test that leads to transformation. Yet its heart beats with the rhythms of ancestor veneration and ritual, where the boundary between the living and the dead is thin, and where a girl's only hope lies in the secret power of remembrance. This tale reminds us that the Cinderella story, long before glass slippers and fairy godmothers, was shaped by the fears and hopes of families bound by loss, longing, and the search for justice. In 1634, the city of Naples saw the publication of a book that would change the course of European storytelling. Giambattista Basile's Pentamerone, a collection of tales told in the Neapolitan dialect, included a version of Cinderella that few today would recognize. The story is called La Gatta Cenerentola, often translated as Cat Cinderella. Its world is not one of gentle magic or quiet suffering, but of blood, dirt, and household betrayal. The heroine is Zezzola, a young woman living under the thumb of a cruel stepmother. Unlike later sanitized versions, Zezzola's story begins not with submission, but with a crime. Urged on by her governess, Zezzola murders her stepmother, crushing her neck with the lid of a chest. The act is neither hidden nor softened. Basile describes it with a bluntness that leaves no room for innocence. In this world, the boundaries between victim and perpetrator blur, and the path to freedom is paved with complicity. After the murder, the governess marries Zezzola's father and brings 6 daughters of her own into the household. Zezzola, who hoped for kindness, finds herself more enslaved than before. She is forced into the ashes, given the mocking name Cenerentola, and treated as less than a servant. The tale lingers on humiliation, on filth, hunger, and the jeering laughter of her stepsisters. There is no fairy godmother here. Instead, a magical date tree, planted by Zezzola and watered with her own tears, becomes her only source of hope. Birds nesting in its branches drop gifts of fine clothing, allowing her to attend the royal festival in secret. At the festival, the prince is captivated by Zezzola, and rather than a glass slipper, he slips a ring onto her finger as she flees. The search for the mysterious woman is not a gentle quest, but a public ordeal. Recognition comes not through simple beauty or virtue, but through the proof of the ring and the silent knowledge of what Zezzola has endured. Basile's tale is steeped in the violence and coarseness of 17th century Naples. The story's pleasures are earthy, its justice rough. The Pentamerone was written for an adult audience, familiar with the dangers of family life and the thin line between survival and damnation. In this early European version, Cinderella is neither a saint nor a victim, but a survivor, marked by guilt, cunning, and the stains of ashes that refuse to wash away. In 1697, a new version of the Cinderella story appeared in Paris, bound in blue and gold and bearing the name of Charles Perrault. Unlike its predecessors, this tale was crafted for candlelit salons, where courtiers and writers debated the nature of grace, virtue, and social ambition. The world of Perrault's Cendrillon is not a marketplace or a peasant's hearth, but a world of powdered wigs, crystal chandeliers, and careful politeness. Here, cruelty is softened, and violence gives way to gentility. The stepmother and stepsisters still humiliate and overwork Cinderella, but their malice is filtered through sighs and whispers, not blood or blows. Perrault's greatest innovation lies in the figure of the fairy godmother, a gentle maternal presence who transforms a pumpkin into a gilded coach, mice into sleek horses, and a ragged dress into a shimmering ball gown. With a wave of her wand, she creates not just a new appearance, but a new possibility. The lost shoe remains, but in Perrault's text, it is no longer a ring, nor a golden or fur slipper. It is the famous pantoufle de verre, the glass slipper. This detail, printed twice in the original French, has sparked centuries of debate. Some argue that Perrault intended a fur slipper, pantoufle de verre, since fur was a mark of luxury in medieval France. Yet the 1697 edition, preserved in the Gallica archives, is clear. There is no scribal error, no marginal note. The slipper is glass slipper, fragile and transparent, as if conjured from the air itself. Glass, in Perrault's world, is a symbol of refinement and delicacy. It cannot be stretched or forced. Only the true wearer can claim it. The glass slipper becomes more than a test of identity. It is a test of purity, a visible marker of worth in a society obsessed with appearances. In the salons of Louis XIV, where every gesture was measured, this slipper was a miracle of taste, a detail both impossible and irresistible. But Perrault's story is not only about magic and transformation. It ends not with revenge, but with forgiveness. When Cinderella is revealed as the prince's chosen bride, she does not punish her stepsisters. Instead, she embraces them, arranges their marriages, and invites them into her new life. The message is clear: grace, patience, and kindness are the true paths to happiness. The violence of earlier versions is replaced by a moral suited to a courtly audience, one that prizes self-control over retribution and elegance over raw survival. In Perrault's hands, the Cinderella story becomes a fable for the age of reason and display. The glass slipper, shimmering and impossible, stands as the tale's most enduring image, a symbol of transformation, aspiration, and the fragile line between fortune and loss. In 1812, Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm published their first edition of Kinder- und Hausmärchen, a collection that included a version of Cinderella unlike any told before. Their Aschenputtel lives under the same roof as her father, who remains passive while her stepmother and stepsisters strip her of dignity and force her to sleep among the ashes. The familiar test of the lost shoe takes a brutal turn. When the prince arrives with the golden slipper, the stepsisters, desperate for a royal future, resort to self-mutilation. At their mother's urging, one slices off her toe, the other her heel, each hoping to force her foot into the tiny shoe. Blood seeps from the slipper, betraying their deception. The prince, alerted by doves perched in the hazel tree above Aschenputtel's mother's grave, discovers the truth and finds the real bride. Retribution does not end with exposure. At the wedding, the doves descend once more, this time to peck out the eyes of both stepsisters. The final image is stark: the sisters, blinded, condemned to a lifetime of darkness as punishment for their vanity and cruelty. The Grimm's original edition offered no mercy, only a public reckoning. Later printings, especially those after 1819, adjusted details, but the core violence remained. The mutilation and blinding served as warnings, not just to children, but to anyone tempted by envy or deceit. These punishments, absent from Perrault's refined salons, reflected a world where justice was physical, visible, and inescapable. The Grimm brothers did not invent these details. They gathered them from German oral traditions where tales were told as much to instruct as to entertain. Their editorial notes reveal a deliberate choice to preserve the severity of folk justice, even as they faced criticism from clergy and parents. Over time, later editions softened the edges, but the early Aschenputtel stands as a testament to a time when fairy tales did not flinch from the consequences of wrongdoing. Ashes, shoes, and lost names form the backbone of a story that has traveled continents and centuries, yet always returns to the same haunting images. Folklorists catalog Cinderella as a TU-510A, a tale type defined by a persecuted heroine, a magical or animal helper, and a lost shoe as the key to her true identity. This skeleton of motifs repeats from Egypt to China to Europe, each detail carrying more weight than it first appears. The ashes, or cinders, are more than dirt. In early versions, the hearth is a threshold, a liminal space between the world of the living and the world of spirits, a place of ritual impurity but also potential rebirth. Forced to sleep among the ashes, the heroine is marked as an outsider, stripped of her family name and status. In Bazile's Neapolitan dialect, she becomes Cenerentola, the girl of the cinders. In German, she is Aschenputtel. The motif index, the tool scholars use to track the DNA of stories, lists this as a marker of exclusion and humiliation, but also of transformation. Emerging from the ashes, the heroine is reborn, her suffering visible in the soot that clings to her skin. The shoe, too, is never just a shoe. Whether a sandal, a golden slipper, or Perrault's glass pantoufle, its impossible fit is the test that reveals the heroine's true self. In societies where inheritance and marriage determined a woman's fate, a shoe that fits only one foot is a perfect symbol of legitimacy, proof that cannot be faked. The stepsisters' desperate attempts to force their feet into the slipper, even at the cost of blood, are not merely acts of envy. They are acts of social ambition. The motif index codes these moments as public trials, rituals of recognition where the community, not only the prince, witnesses the restoration of order. These symbols, ashes and shoes, bind the story across cultures. Anthropologists read them as reflections of social anxiety, the fear of lost status, the hope for transformation, the dangers of stepping outside one's place. In every version, the heroine's journey from the ashes to the throne is not a private victory alone, but a challenge to the world that tried to erase her. These motifs endure because they speak to the deepest structures of family, power, and identity, long before the story was softened for children. By the middle of the 19th century, the Cinderella story found itself in the hands of a new set of storytellers, publishers, and editors, catering to a rapidly growing market for children's books. In Victorian England, chapbooks and toy books brought fairy tales to families across social classes. But these slim volumes bore little resemblance to the raw tales of Basile or the grim justice of the Grimms. Publishers, keenly aware of their audience, began to reshape the narrative. Scenes of foot mutilation and blinding disappeared from print, replaced by gentle trials and happy reunions. Sales ledgers from the era reveal a clear preference. Editions that omitted violence outsold their unexpurgated counterparts, sometimes by margins of 10-1. The Cinderella of the Victorian nursery was a figure of patience and virtue, not a witness to blood or punishment. This process of sanitization accelerated in the 20th century, as fairy tales became a staple of family entertainment. By the 1950s, the Walt Disney Studio brought Cinderella to life in Technicolor, guided not only by artistic vision, but by the commercial realities of the post-war family market. Internal memos from the Disney production team reference the need to comply with the Motion Picture Production Code, which forbade excessive cruelty or explicit suffering. As a result, the stepsisters' fate was softened further. No mutilation, no blinding, only comic embarrassment and a swift exit from the story. The glass slipper, shimmering and unbreakable, became the story's enduring symbol. In Disney's hands, it was not a test of blood or pain, but a promise of transformation without cost. What began as a tale of violence and survival had become a myth of hope and reward, shaped by the demands of publishers, moralists, and mass audiences. The story's darker origins were buried beneath layers of polish, leaving behind a version that could be told at bedtime, free from the shadows that once haunted the hearth. Fairy tales still shape our expectations of justice, of transformation, and of what we teach our children. Each retelling of Cinderella reflects the values we choose to preserve or erase. Today, as classic stories continue to evolve, their origins remind us that even the gentlest myths once carried warnings for the real world. Deciding which truths we keep and which we hide is a choice we make with every generation. Share your thoughts below.